We are going to finish off section 7.3 by working through some application problems. Application problems, or applying proportions, is just a fancy way of saying that we're going to work through some story problems. When we're working through these story problems, we definitely want to make sure we keep our units straight, right? So we want to make sure that we're labeling things correctly. And as we're going through and doing these, one way we can do this is to actually set up proportions. However, I think it's easier to draw ourselves a little 2x2 grid, label that grid, and then use that to help solve our problems. So you have some different options as you're going through and working on these. It's really up to you, but I think the easiest way is to set up this little 2x2 table. We're going to put some labels over here on the left. We're going to put numbers in each of the boxes, and then we're going to use that to set up a proportion. Okay. So for example 3A, Cheyenne was able to drive 360 miles on 24 gallons of gas. At this rate, how many miles will Cheyenne be able to drive on 16 gallons? And so we're going to start by labeling the two different things that we're looking at. So in this problem, one of the numbers that we have has a unit of measurement of miles. Right? The other thing that we are looking at is we are looking at gallons of gas. Right? So we're just going to label each of these rows here. Right? Now in our first sentence, we're told that Cheyenne was able to drive 360 miles on 24 gallons of gas. Now that we have these labeled, we can go ahead and just nicely put these values in here. So 360 miles on 24 gallons of gas. Okay. And then our question says, at that rate, how many miles will Cheyenne be able to drive on 16 gallons? Right, so how many miles, that's what we're looking for. That's our unknown. That's our n. Feel free to use any other variable that you want. I'm just going to use an n. And we're told that we have 16 gallons here. Right? So looking at what we have, if we were to imagine an equal sign in between here, right, what we have in this little table is exactly the same as 360 over 24 equals n over 16. Okay? So that little 2x2 grid gives us the same as our proportion that we have. Right, now, what we're going to do is we're just going to use this box to solve. Right, so we're not necessarily going to rewrite this, again, if you can, if you want to, but I'm not necessarily going to use this. I'm just going to use the information that we have here because it's exactly the same. Right, now, in the last example, we said that we could do some canceling if we wanted. So if we look at this, 360 and 24. 36 and 24 are both divisible by 12. So if we divide both of these by 12, 360 divided by 12, well, 36 divided by 12 is 3. And then we also have a 0. So we have a 30. 24 divided by 12 gives us 2. So we have a reduced fraction of 30 over 2. Looking at that reduced fraction, we can actually reduce that again. 30 and 2 are both even, so we can divide them both by 2. 30 divided by 2 is going to give us 15. 2 divided by 2 is going to give us 1. Right, so the proportion that we're actually going to solve, right, is going to be 15 over 1 equals n over 16. Right, so now we're going to multiply. 1 times n is 1n, and we need to multiply 15 times 16. So I'm going to come over here to my scratch paper. 15 times 16. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 1 is 6 plus 3 is 9. All right, and then we move over a place value. You can put a 0 in here. You could leave a space. You could put a little x, whatever you want to. Now we're going to multiply starting with our 1. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 1 is 1. Now we're going to add these together. 0 plus 0 is 0. 9 plus 5 is 14. Carry the 1, we get 240. So 1n equals 240. So we're going to divide both sides by 1. That's not going to change. We want to make sure that we label our answer appropriately using the correct units of measurement. Right? And we were looking for miles. So our answer is going to be 240 miles. Right, now as we move to this last page of notes in section 7.3, we're going to continue doing a lot of the same here. Right, a roofing company sells roofing material for $12 per square yard. How many square yards of roofing material can be purchased for $900? Right, so we are looking at dollars and we are looking at square yards. So we're going to start by labeling our little 2x2 grid with those units of measurement. Right, so a roofing company sells roofing material for $12 per square yard. Remember, per means one. So we have $12 for 1 square yard. How much can be purchased for $900? Well, that $900 is our dollar amount that goes up top, and then we have an N down below. Right, in this case, we can't reduce. 12 and 1 is already into reduced form. Right, so 12 over 1 equals 900 over N. We're going to cross multiply. 12 times n is 12n. 1 times 900 is 900. Divide both sides by 12. Right, so we're going to move to our scratch paper. 12 goes into 900. Right, so now we're thinking about our facts of 12. 12 is a 2-digit number that is in our multiplication table. So feel free to refer back to a multiplication table if that's going to be useful or beneficial to you. As close as we can get to 90, again, we're not necessarily thinking the entire 900. Well, 12 times 7 is 84. Mm-hmm. Then we're going to subtract. 90 minus 84 gives us 6. We bring down our 0. 12 goes into 60 exactly 5 times. Mm-hmm. So our N is going to be 75 square yards. All right, so we're going to work through a few more. At a hardware store, the price of 4 feet of chain is $2.60. What length of chain will $13 buy? So we are looking at feet and we are looking at dollar amounts. Okay, so 4 feet of chain for $2.60. Right, and then we have N and we have 13. In this case, we could reduce. We don't really have to if we don't want to. Again, it's up to you. You never have to reduce things in the lowest terms. One thing I am going to do just to make this a little bit easier, I'm just going to ignore that 0. So when I rewrite my proportion, I'm going to have 4 over 2.6 equals n over 13. Now I'm going to cross multiply. 2.6 times n. 4 times 13 is 52. We're going to divide both sides by 2.6. So again, we're going to come over here, use our scratch paper. 2.6 into 52. Remember when we're dividing with decimals that we need to shift our decimal point over if we have a decimal in our divisor. Right? So I'm going to shift that decimal over 1. Right now there's an invisible decimal after that 2. So we want to shift that decimal point over 1, so we're going to have to add a 0 here. Right? So we're really dividing, instead of 2.6 into 52, we're dividing 26 into 520. If you want to move your decimal before you write out your division problem, you could do it then as well. We could take this and move this decimal over, which means we need to move that one over. It's the same thing. 26 goes into 52 actually exactly twice. 2 times 26 is 52. We don't go into that 0, but we do want to make sure we put a 0 up top. So our N is 20. We were missing a value of feet. So $13 will buy 20 feet of chain. At Charles County Community College, there are 10 math classes for every 15 English classes. If the college offers 28 math classes, how many English classes does it offer? Right, so we're going to label these math and English. Right, there are 10 math classes for every 15 English classes. Right, if the college offers 28 math classes, how many English classes are offered? Looking at the left side of our proportion, 10 and 15 are both divisible by 5. 10 divided by 5 gives us 2. 15 divided by 5 gives us 3. Again, it's not the end of the world if you don't notice that. It just makes things a little bit easier and nicer as we're working through this. So the proportion we're really solving is 2 over 3 equals 28 over n. We're going to cross multiply. 2 times n is 2n. 28 times 3. 3 times 8 is 24. 3 times 2 is 6 plus 2 is 8. So we have an 84 here. Divide both sides by 2. Again, we could show the long division, but this one works out nicely. 2 goes into 8 4 times. 2 goes into 4 twice. So our n equals 42 English classes. Alright, and then one more story problem to finish this off. Karen received 15 votes for every 24 people who voted. If she received 300 votes, how many people voted? Right, so we are comparing the number of votes to the number of people. Karen received 15 votes for every 24 people. She received 300 votes, and our unknown, what we're looking for is the number of people that voted. Like the last example, we can do a little bit of reducing. 15 and 24 are both divisible by 3. 15 divided by 3 gives us 5. 24 divided by 3 gives us 8. Now we're going to cross multiply. We'll write out our proportion first. 5 over 8 equals 300 over n. Cross multiply. 5 times n. 8 times 300. 8 times 3 is 24. Bring the zeros with us. Now we're going to divide by 5. So we're going to use our scratch paper. Divide 5 into 2,400. 5 goes into 24 twice. 4 times 5 is 20. Subtracting it 4. Bring down the 0. 5 goes into 40 8 times. Bring down the last 0. 5 does not go into 0, but we make sure we put a 0 up top. So our n is 480 people. Right. So when we're setting up our proportion application problems, it's important to keep our units of measurement straight, label appropriately. You can directly set up a proportion or use a little 2x2 box to set up your proportion. Once you set up that box, if you want to jump straight from this to there and kind of skip that middle step, that's totally up to you. You will want some scratch paper handy to do a little bit of multiplication and division. There might be a little bit of decimal or fraction stuff that's involved in there as well. Some of the problems are going to have nicer numbers, some of them are going to have kind of not as nice numbers. So just kind of make sure as you're going through that you're working through all the arithmetic correctly. Again, the key thing with our proportions is to cross multiply and divide, and then canceling before we do that, right, is always an option to help us make the story problems and make the numbers as nice and easy to work with using our arithmetic as possible.